This is the gospel of Jesus Christ according to John, the 6th chapter. Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, also called the Sea of Tiberias. A large crowd kept following him because they saw the signs that he was doing for the sick. Jesus went up the mountain and sat down there with his disciples. Now the Passover, the festival of the Jews, was near. When he looked up and saw a large crowd coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread for these people to eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are they among so many people?" Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now there was a great deal of grass in the place, so they sat down, about 5,000 in all. Then Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. When they were satisfied, he told his disciples, "Gather up the fragments left over so that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up, and from the fragments of the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten, they filled 12 baskets. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they began to say, "This is indeed the prophet who has come into the world." When Jesus realized they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain by himself. This is the gospel of our Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Well, over the centuries, there has been understandably no small amount of speculation about the nature of this feeding. One of the church fathers, and I will admit I don't know which one, wrote about how the bread would have regenerated as fast as you could take it, so that you were constantly grabbing a piece of bread from what was a full loaf. More modern speculation suggests that maybe there was already enough food there, sequestered away in private bags, and Jesus performed the staggering miracle of opening people's hearts to share. I don't know what happened. I wasn't there, and the Gospels don't clarify the mechanism of the miracle, but all of them are clear about one thing. We began with not enough. We end up with baskets left over. That's the fundamental nature of the miracle. It doesn't really matter how it happened. We have made the transition from scarcity to abundance. And in that, Jesus has revealed something about the nature of God's creation. However Jesus did it, he is revealing the nature of reality. We're about to enter into a several-week period in which Jesus will talk about bread. He will dive deeper and deeper into the mystery and mysticism of the Eucharistic feast he will establish. And so while my own piety is significantly centered around the mysticism we practice at that table, I would like to stay rooted in this reality, at least for today. You see, I used a slightly incorrect word just a little bit ago to describe this feeding in John's gospel. I called it a miracle. The other gospel writers use that word, so it's not a terrible mistake. But John uses the word signs to describe these works of Jesus' power. John is explicitly drawing our attention to the idea that Jesus is not shifting the nature of reality by magic to match his desires at the moment. He is giving a sign to a lost and confused people that points to what was already existing and true about creation. You thought it was scarcity. I will show you that it is abundant. What would the world be like if we took this sign seriously? If we really believed it? Because I find most of us don't. I find we treat it at best like the announcement at the beginning of a movie to turn off our phones. We understand the reason for it, but at most we'll silence them. So I find we understand this idea of God's providence. We say that God provides, but what would happen if we really believed that God has provided? What would happen if we set aside the notion that it's a competition for limited resources and we truly believed that God has set up the world with enough for all of creation? How would that change the way we interact with our neighbors as individuals, as congregations, as members of a larger pluralistic society? There's a common saying. I don't know its origins, but it goes like this. There are two types of people at a pizza party. There are those who take only one slice because they're worried there won't be enough for everybody. And there are those who take three for the exact same reason. What happens? What happens when we act out of the belief that there won't be enough? It ends up being true, doesn't it? I mean, at the same time that some might be lamenting at third slice they didn't really need to eat, others who really want another slice are looking at an empty box, and it stands as proof to all of us we were right. There wasn't enough. What we did was appropriate. Now, analogies don't extend beyond their capacity. They only prove one thing. This analogy doesn't take into account the real-world scenarios in which a handful of people not only took all of the pizza, they bought the pizzeria, the suppliers of the ingredients, and the logistics to deliver the pizza, and they are telling the people with one to blame those who took 3 slices. That's a larger conversation. It's not addressed by this analogy, but this analogy does beg the question, how would we behave at the party if we really believed there was enough? What if nobody felt the need to set aside unnecessary resources just in case they might be needed? What if none of us felt forced to forego our own flourishing for fear that another might not even be able to take root? What if we trusted there was just enough? How that changes each of us individually will depend on which one we are at the party. Did we take 1 or 3 slices? But I believe as a group we will find that if we enter in with that assumption that there is enough, it will end up being proven just as true as if we began with the assumption there wasn't. Because that is the reality Jesus is revealing. God did not set humans into a world of scarcity to watch us compete viciously over limited resources. God set us into a world of balance and abundance, capable of sustaining all of creation, and then tasked us with the job of stewarding that balance. That is reality. It's difficult to see. That's why this revelation, this sign, seems like a miracle. The world inundates us with proof of supposed scarcity. We are told that we should accept it as indisputable fact that we are in competition for survival, never mind flourishing. The abundance of God's providence. The abundance of God's providence is perhaps the most contested of all Christian doctrine in this world, even amongst the faithful. Like the people at the pizza party, the false prosperity preachers and the over-the-top self-denying ascetics, while they are behaving in opposite ways, they are both doing so out of the belief that God did not provide enough, and we have to rectify the situation. Jesus reveals the opposite. And his followers were called to trust him. That's difficult. I don't think any of us do it perfectly. I know I don't. The devil is unrelenting in convincing us that we are in competition with our neighbor. It takes an equal persistence to remind ourselves of what Christ revealed. We could always do it better. We should never tire of trying to improve our vision of God's abundance. But I told my congregations this about themselves this Sunday. This is what I said about Grace and Emmanuel Lutheran churches in Manorville and Ford City, PA. I said, we are small congregations. We have our own struggles, and none of us there are blind to them, I don't believe. But when I am asked by colleagues and other folks in ministry to describe the congregations I serve, I will often use the phrase spiritually healthy. And the way we approach this abundance versus scarcity issue, it's a part of that. I've been working with the councils of these two congregations for about 5 years now, and I can't say I've always disagreed with I can't say I have always agreed with the decisions that were made. I'm not a unilateral ruler. I am a member of a congregation that I serve. But I have always been pleased by the way we arrived at the decisions that were made, and this scarcity abundance issue is no different. Never once have I seen us turn down an opportunity for ministry for which we were excited because we thought we couldn't do it and God wouldn't provide the means. I've seen us trim our budgets. That we've done. I've seen us find different ministries and activities that needed to be brought to an end. I have seen that, but in each case, it was because we looked at the expense of either time or money and decided it was no longer necessary for our mission. It didn't serve our community, or it didn't energize our own people. It was a third slice of pizza we didn't need. We could leave it on the table, and we did. And what happened was, it was still there when someone else came forward with another idea that excited us. Look, we could all still get better at this. We could always work on trusting God more and stewarding what we were given better, but this is something I believe that the congregations I serve do better than average. This is a point of pride I have as their pastor. It's something I think we can invite others to participate in. To work on seeing God's abundance and being a sign of that abundance. Now, there will come a time in the future when even the existence of these congregations is no longer necessary for God's mission. But for now, there's a community that needs fed and served. There's one around us. There's one around wherever it is you may be listening from. And I don't play the part of Jesus in this story. I am at best one of the disciples, most likely one in the crowd. But I think it is worthwhile, as we look at the community that needs fed and served, to ask you the question Jesus asked of Philip. Where are we to buy bread for these people to eat?